Thank you for joining the January 31st, 2019 VOLTHA call. We have a couple topics on our agenda today, and we do record the sessions and post them to YouTube, so please be mindful of that during discussions and presentations. With that, I think we will briefly go over the plans for today. So we do have a presentation planned from Deutsche Telekom on their FTTB solution. There'll be some time for questions with that as well, of course. And then we will also have some follow-up on the discussion that has been ongoing on VOLTHA Discuss related to the repo structure and strategy for 2.0. And Chip, thank you for putting that proposal forth for the discussion this morning. And we got a couple comments back, so much appreciated. And Bjorn, I think I see that you've joined the, are you on the audio bridge yet?
Yes, I am.
Great.
And hopefully you can hear me well.
Yes, I can. Should I give you presentation rights?
Okay.
All right, let me make you a presenter. And you should have them any moment now.
Yes, okay.
And we can see your slides.
Okay. Let me go to presentation mode. Okay. Okay, can you see it well? Then I can start.
Yes, you can. Thank you.
Okay, one mistake. Okay. So we should start with that slide, which contains a couple of general statements regarding the FTTB use case. I would go through that, and yeah, if anyone has a comment or a question or something like that, feel free to interrupt me and hook in. So first of all, one of the important requirements from our side is that a discovered DPU must trigger a product message which contains the serial number. It's quite comparable to what they expect in the FTTH use case, but as you know, in the FTTH use case, we have additional the registration ID on the list, which is actually a little bit in discussion. So I'm not sure what will be the target for FTTH, but for FTTB, we don't use the registration ID at all. We only go with the serial number. But nevertheless, if there are additional information like DPU type, software version, etc., these information are welcome and needed, but maybe not essentially needed with the in the discovered moment. So in this initial step. So for that, we need the must is only the serial number. So after that is discovered, the DPU will be accepted by our management framework, and the DPU will be provisioned, at least on the PON layer. That includes the assigning of ONU ID and assigning of alloc ID, and yeah, gem ports and all these TC layer stuff. And that will be done via OMCI. So that includes the owner's controller and the VOLTHA layer to assign all these things. And then the first or the next step is to set up a transparent data path. This is needed initially for the in-band management channel for the DPU, so that the DPU itself can reach the PMA, the persistent management agent, which is running on one of the compute nodes or higher up in the in the network. And this one is responsible for the G.fast and for the switching part of the DPU. It is in our particular case, it's realized via netconf yang, but it's not a must. Therefore, later on in this description, you will find terms like non-OMCI domain or something like that. So that's the important thing. So that's the manage that we in that first step for FTTB, the management of G.fast and switching part is out of scope of VOLTHA so far, but it's not excluded in general. So for a second phase, it's absolutely worth to discuss about including the entire DPU into or control the entire DPU via ONOS and VOLTHA. But from our current perspective, that needs some more discussions and probably also a lot of development and would block the resources from doing other and more important things. So therefore, we marked it with a lower priority and shifted to a later phase. So in the current phase, we are only managing or controlling via ONOS and VOLTHA the one part of the DPU. So that's probably one of the major statements for that. Yeah, and later on we have to configure Ethernet-related functions via these transparent channel, as I mentioned, and then. That includes it has not been managed by VOLTHA, but the Ethernet part of the DPU includes adding an outer VLAN tag to whatever comes from the customer side, and of course in the downstream direction stripping these outer tags. Of course, assigning p-bit values or setting p-bit values according to special rules. It's not unfortunately, but it's not just the copying from the customer provided information. It's a little bit more, but I will explain that on one of the next slides. The outer VLAN tag, which is added by the DPU, represents the customer. So that means we have a different outer tag for each G.fast port. And this outer tag is unique for the entire access node. So in that case, it means for the OLT, not for the DPU. Yeah. Then all customer tags. That's also important. That all customer tags at the uni port of the DPU must be transferred transparently via the DPU and the OLT. So nothing will be changed there. And that includes the VLAN ID value and also the p-bit value. And in a later phase or in the next phase, that also includes multiple layer of VLAN tags. So especially for some business services in DTU, we have already a double tag traffic at the uni port. And this has to be handled transparently over the entire network. So therefore, it can be considered as payload. It must not process. There must not be any translation or modification, but it must be handled transparent, and it must be transferred over the network. So in that case, the OLT must be transparent also for the S-tag. So that the OLT in the FTTB case is completely transparent in terms of layer 2 traffic. So inside the DPU, we are using the virtual Ethernet interface point message entity or managed entity as the demarcation between the two different managed entities, like the OMCI and the non-OMCI managed domains. Okay. Yeah, it's so in some implementation we observed that some are using the physical path termination also as the internal interface in the DPU, but that's not our preferred way to go forward. So in the OMCI domain, we use .1p plus VLAN mapping to map the user traffic into Gemport and queues, and then we schedule it according to strict priority per user. So we have one Gemport per queue. Each user has 4 Gemports, so that means also 4 queues, of course, and one single TCON per user. For the management channel, I explained at the beginning, we have to translate the VLAN value as well as the pbit value in the initial moment via OMCI. So that's maybe something tricky, and yeah, maybe that's an aspect which comes not original with, so which we have to develop something for that. So the OMCI path for the management of the PON part of the DPU use in general a separate path with its own Gemport and its own TCON. So these are the general statements, and then let me come to some figures which reflects more or less what I mentioned already. So maybe here are some more detailed information, and it's a little bit more visualized, but in general it reflects what I mentioned. So we have here on that on that picture, we have on the left lower side the customer with a CPE 123 and with a customer tag XYZ, and that is an upstream transfer to the GFast port of the DPU. And then the DPU has to handle the XYZ transparently, as I mentioned, and add the ABC. And that includes, and then that has an additional identifier, which is the owner ID. And then the OLT has to handle that transparently in the first phase. In a later step, in a later release, we will use probably segment routing labels for that. Which represent more or less the DPU. Okay, go ahead. Okay. Yeah, and then the other aspect here is that you see that the owner's OLT app is used to control the OLT and the PON part of the DPU. Yeah, that's more or less all on that. So here you can see the pbit behavior or the pbit handling, what I already mentioned on the first slide. It's a little bit visualized. There you can see on the left-hand side the customer provided information. The VLAN we don't care, therefore it's represented by just a C. And then we have all the pbits, and we have also the untagged option on that side. And then the DPU has to add the outer tag, which is here represented by AMP, which stands for Access Node Port Tag. It's probably a DT internal name. You can also name it S tag or whatever you want. In fact, it's an outer tag, an additional outer tag. And that copies the pbit value in case the pbit of the customer provided tag is 0 to 6. In case it is 7, then it adds the outer tag with a P0, just to have in the higher layer network no pbit 7 tag traffic, because that's
So this picture doesn't seem to reflect the 4 Gemport model on the previous statement. Does this need to be updated?
That picture, I'm not sure if I understood it right. The voice quality is not so good, but that reflects that has no relation to the Gemport first. I come to the TC layer later. in the next slide. That only reflects the overall layer 2 behavior of the network, and that of course has to be supported by the DPU and the OAT. But on most of this slide is not related to point-specific things like jump port or T-cons. Only the very right column has some statements on that, and unfortunately it's in German, so I'm sorry for that. It's unfortunately a picture just copied from another document, so I was not able to translate it before. But I think the important things are understandable also in case you don't speak German.
Well, just the one, the column that says priority queues per DPU GPON upstream, where there are 8 queues.
Yeah, okay.
So that's okay. So that's not related to the gem ports. In that generic statement, it's only related to queues. And if the entities, the physical entities, are able to handle so many queues, then it could be a realization of that, to have 8 queues per customer. But there's also an option to operate it with only 4 queues. Okay.
That will be depicted on the next slide.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
The more important, and also strike out the what is mentioned here is AMCP. That's more on our legacy platform relevant. That's not so relevant on the platform we are talking here. But the important aspect I already addressed is the in-band management, which is generated inside the DPU and comes with a VLAN tag 4090 P3 in our particular case right now. And with that VLAN tag and priority bit, it comes to from the switching part, or from the management part of the DPU, in fact, to the virtual Ethernet interface point. And there, this kind of traffic has to be translated to a VLAN 4 with priority 7. And in the final or in the target architecture, it is still single tagged. It will transfer to the OLT single tagged, and instead of the data traffic, which is always not always the untagged user traffic is also single tagged, but all the others are double tagged. So the queues I already mentioned. So there are 8 queues here in that picture. We have a mapping algorithm of qubits to 4 queues as well. So in that case, you can use also 4 queues, and then these queues have a 1-by-1 relation to gem ports, and these 4 or 8 gem ports are mapped in a single T-cont. Here it is mentioned with type 3 and dedicated values, but don't care about the values. These are subject for change. But the general principle of handling VLANs and P-bits is depicted here. And that's the target thing. So especially for these translation of the in-band management values, that's not realized today, but also that will be addressed later on. So after the layer 2 view on the architecture, we will come to the TC layer architecture, and that's and here you can see what I already mentioned. You can also operate all these things with only 4 gem ports. That means only 4 queues, but the assignment of the p-bits to the queues is like it's depicted here. So 0 and 1 to the lowest priority, 2 and 3 to the next one, then only 4 to the next one, and 5 and 6 together to the highest priority one. And the P7 will not be mapped here, because if everything works fine, no p-bit 7 can be or will be here present. The P7 you can see at the lowest part of the figure, you see that the management VLAN traffic is assigned with P7, and there we map the P7 in a dedicated jam port with a dedicated TCON for the management traffic. That's in fact the in-band management for the netconf YANG part of the DPU, not the OMCI part. The OMCI comes with an additional TCON. Yeah, that's on the left-hand side. The statements are more or less what I already mentioned. The scheduling per user among these 4 queues is based on a strict priority, and each user has its own TCON. So all the users are handled equally. So no user can disturb the other one. Each has more or less the same rights and the same privileges. The only thing is that the higher priority traffic of a single user can disturb the lower priority traffic of the same user. So that's in our view of the network not a critical aspect. Critical would be if one user can disturb the other one, but that's excluded in that kind of architecture. So here in the left-hand statement, there's also mentioned the ANCP. I put it in brackets because it might not be relevant in our data center-oriented architecture.
Bjorn, a question on the users disturbing each other. Do you not oversubscribe at all? I mean, I would presume that the highest priority traffic of all users would be, you know, I mean, if you've got voice traffic or something, the highest priority traffic of all users would presumably be served first, unless you have no oversubscription.
Yeah, of course, there's an oversubscription, but the TCON, every user has a dedicated. Therefore, we are using Type 3 as a dedicated assured bandwidth, and also if we have in our current case we have 16 ports. So if 15 user sends a lot of high priority traffic in it, then the 16th one can at least occupy his assured bandwidth with his best effort traffic. So
when you say the users can't affect each other, the users can't affect each other's assured. I mean, to the point where everybody's. I mean, if there's a lot of assured, then users can affect somebody else's best effort.
Yeah, a little bit, but only until the assured bandwidth limitation.
Right. Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. No. Just yeah. Okay, I understand.
Okay.
So just one other thing, Bjorn. So Genport 4. So only one of those would be in use at any time for a DPU, I assume. So there's only one management channel for the DPU as a whole.
There's one management channel for the entire DPU, yes, which is the very lowest one, and then we have per user 4 jam ports. That's not what we have today in our POC, but that's what we name it as a target architecture or something like that.
Oh yeah, okay. I'm sorry, I was misreading that. So the where the yellow box is PCP equals 7 is always translated to PCP 0. So actually all those, so the 4 gem ports are actually for an individual G.fast port, and then there's an additional one for the in-band management channel and ANCP traffic. Okay.
Yes.
I understand. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, that's probably all for that. Here, there's another drawing of the concrete OMCI model.
So that's more or less what you have on the picture before, but with the concrete managed entities which have to be addressed with the MAC bridge as a central unit, and on the left-hand side you have the virtual Ethernet interface point, and then you have these MAC bridge ports with a VLAN tagging filter for the dedicated user, for the dedicated outer tags, which were assigned by the switching part of the DPU, and then the priority mapper to sort the different priority into the 4 gem ports and associated queues, and then map everything in the different T-cons. So that's the same picture as before, just from the G988 perspective regarding the managed entities which have to be addressed. So that's the target thing, and here are some statements about the current realization in our POC that I discussed already with the Realizers guy, who made the realization in our POC. So there we have only one gem port carries all the traffic of all the subscribers today with all P-bits except the one used for the management traffic. That's in fact the case, as I mentioned before. We have the 0 to 6 mapped to one gem port. That's all the user traffic, and we have the P7 mapped to a different gem port. That's the management. That's the management traffic. So there's the separation in the case today is not that clear as it is in the target architecture, but of course there's some development needed. But that's how we realize it today. And there's also an example for the flow rules which are addressed via the owner's OLT app to provision on the PON part of the DPU. So then, and there's a statement that changes are made it already in the core and then the adapters, and as soon as I understood it, also in the OLT app for honors. But of course, that kind of work is not finalized in terms of our target architecture. It's more or less an intermediate step realized today to have the FTTB use case up and running in our current POC. So that's more or less what I would explain today. Feel free to answer questions or something like that, or I think I will provide that slide after the meeting, and then you can look to it later, digest it, and send questions via email or whatever you prefer. Feel free. But for now, I don't have to add something.
Thank you, Björn. Do you have any questions from the group?
On the diagram further back that showed the connection to the leaf switch, there was the MPLS label that was indicated there. Is that being added on the way out of the OLT, or is that being added on ingress in the leaf?
Good point. As you can see on the very below comment is that it is for a later release. The wish from our chief architect is to set it up in the OLT. That means on what is mentioned here as a Qumran. That could be another switching ASIC, of course, but that's the wish. If for certain reasons or if we come in the discussion to the point where we say that makes no sense to implement this feature in the OLT, then it can be also done at the leaf side. But we don't have the information. The question is how we realize it. So because the idea is to have these MPLS label according to the DPU. So we have to have any kind of identifier at the leaf switch from which to which DPU that traffic belongs.
I see. Okay.
So it's not finalized, the discussion. So it's
yeah, I just know that doing any of the labeling work on the leaf is probably more, well, realizable in the short term.
Of course.
But okay.
Of course. But the wish is slightly different, and yeah, we will see. We will see what's the end of the discussion.
Cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you have any other questions from the group?
I would suggest, you know, Björn, thanks for the detailed description regarding to this use case. And I think, you know, other service provider interested in GDAFAS probably can take this and then compare to individual their use cases also. I think, you know, we can and see what is common and what is different. I think the more common, I think that would be good for the development work, right? So yeah, I think strongly suggest other service provider take this and then compare. Thanks, Björn.
You're welcome, and yeah, I think that's a good idea to going forward to figure out what's common among multiple service provider and what's special, let me say, and then yeah, and then think about or discuss how go forward and address the common parts and of course the special parts everyone has to take care of for themselves.
So Sean, do you want to set a target for when to have the other service providers give some feedback so we can start the comparison and look for commonality? Or leave it for a future meeting or for the lockdown?
You know, I'm not thinking about it. Yeah, I mean, I'm on vacation mode now. So maybe 2 weeks, you know, so maybe.
Okay.
I do want to see, you know, when we have face-to-face, when every service provider, you know, will be at face-to-face at Atran location. I think this is probably something, I think there are some component of this GDAFAS DPU support, I think we should be able to go over. So maybe maybe by the end of the February, we should see what agenda we need to put it in the face-to-face lockdown to support this.
I suspect this probably is very similar to enterprise use cases, even without GFAS. Just the fact that you have to carry 4,000 VLANs for a customer sounds very, very enterprise specific as well. So there probably is some overlap there.
Yeah, yeah. I'm curious. So how many total Gen port that ONU, the link, you know, from the ONU toward the OOT will need to basically is supported on this one now? Is that, you know, so each user has.
You can see it here. So if each user, we have 16 ports, 16 users, each has 4 gem ports. So that means 64. Then we have a 5th one for the management VLAN. Yeah, probably 66 one for the OMCI path. But I think that comes for free. That
okay, you do have that. It's the need resource 17 TCONs. Okay, great.
But that's a fully subscribed DPU, right?
Absolutely. So what I should mention here is, of course, we will not have in any case a fully populated DPU. What we will have per PON tree, that's the current phase of the discussion. Maybe that value will be changed, but not dramatically. But for the moment, we are calculating 32 users per PON tree. So that means if we install a 16-port GPU, because we only have this one, in a building with only 6 living units, then we calculate only 6 users per this GPU. And if we deploy it in a 16 living unit house, then there are 16, and you only can connect 2 of these GPUs to the PON tree. It's a little bit complicated calculation and planning process behind that. But the overall goal is at the end only 32 users per PON tree. That depends a little bit on the available bandwidth for GPON. So therefore, I mentioned if we discuss it in the term of XGS, that might be increased to 64, but we are not sure. So we are still discussing that, but most probably not higher than 64 users per PON tree.
So Bjorn, so as for your first use, let's say trial or something, are you going to use XGS PON, or you're going to use GPON for your initial rollout for the DPU?
For the initial rollout, I strongly believe we will do it with GPON.
Okay.
Because our short-term available DPU has a GPON interface. What we have done for the POC, as you know, there's only the XGS PON OLT currently available. For the current POC, we are using a point-to-point based DPU with I think with a 1 gig Ethernet uplink connected to an XGS PON ONT, external ONT. So, and in that combination, we have some trouble, of course. Not of course, but we have some trouble. But that's let me say, just a workaround to realize the POC with a given element today. We are heading for a GPON based DPU pretty soon. Which we will already deploy in our legacy environment. But there's a strong demand from our management side that this kind of DPU should also be usable in our SDN related environment. So therefore, I strongly believe we will start with a GPON set DPU.
Okay, and one more question. You may not be able to answer that. It's like one of the examples you said that maybe this apartment only have 6 users, right? Are you still
not a PON, the DPU, not a PON, a DPU?
On the DPU, there are only 6 users for the DPU. Basically the uni side on the DPU. So do you have a different form factor of DPU, or you're going to use that 16-port DPU by default?
Currently, we are strongly focused on the 16-port version.
Okay.
I think it depends on some more investigation for the demand in the network. So the 16, the idea was to not mess up with several versions in the initial step. So, but it's not excluded that we figure out that we have a lot of users in smaller buildings. And then we will also have a demand for smaller size units. But currently we strongly focus on this single version with 16 ports. So that seems to be the best compromise. But no one knows how the deployment will run and what will be targeted first and so on. And therefore, probably in later phases, we are also qualifying different sizes of DPUs.
Okay, great. Okay, anybody else has any question? Okay, thank you, Bjorn.
Thanks, Bjorn. I'll go ahead I'll take presentation right back.
Yeah.
All right. The other topic we had on the agenda today was to try to finalize the repo structure strategy for 2.0. And so let me go over to VOLTHA Discuss, where we had some info on that. Let me move my screen so I can read it myself. There we go. Okay, so Chip had sent out a proposal for discussion today, and we got a couple comments, one from David and then Zach also. I don't believe I saw either of them on the bridge today, so we'll just base it off of what they provided for feedback here. So Chip, I don't know if you want to give a brief recap. It's up here for folks to read. Hopefully folks have read it before the call as well.
Yeah, I was just trying to toss out some initial suggestions and get some conversations going to see if this is a good approach. I guess from Tuesday's meeting, I guess the big takeaway is we want probably to have just a single repo for the shared code. And so I also suggested breaking out maybe the CLI and OF agent, which are in Python, because those probably need to be in their own repos, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
And so with the other suggestion is, do we want to have this as an installable module, maybe hosted up on PyPy, so that we can at least do versioning, so as people consume it, they can lock down exactly what features they have?
Yeah, I like that idea a lot.
Okay. Well, I'm sort of volunteering. I could probably do the installable Python work, and with PyPy you have a login. So I have a login up there to be able to install packages. So we probably want to get more than just myself on that list, just as a backup. So any volunteers, we can handle that once we get things working. And the one thing I did forget in the message is what about the protobuf files? Currently, the protobuf files in the VOLTHA Go are in the base directory, and for the PONSIM adapters that are in Python, they basically copy those up and they run it from that base. So I'm not sure how should we best share the protobuf files.
Would it be possible with the library repo that as part of its makefile production process, it produces the base image and then the protos image that you can then include in your Docker build and overlay like we do now?
Yeah, I can try to find some way to pull those up, because obviously we need the generated Python files, but having a copy of the actual protobuf files is also nice to have when you're in the library. So I can do that. I just had forgot it on the original setup, or the original message I had.
Yeah, but I think the question is, where do we want to store those proto files, right?
Yeah, yeah. So
I mean, they definitely need to be versioned so you know how to wire things together.
Yeah.
Maybe the protos get their own repo then, and they get their own build that produces a Docker image of the protos in and of itself.
And you dep your way into the proto, both on the Go side and the Python side.
Or if you're doing a Docker build and you need your protos, include your protos image that you built from the other one and just overlay it in.
Yeah, I mean that would be fine with me. So if that's good with Ken.
Yeah, I'm fine with having the proto in its own repo. That's fine.
Okay. And obviously we have lots of time to get this right before 2.0, so I'm sure we'll go through a few iterations of things. And I guess the other thing that David Bainbridge brought up is for adapter repos. do we want those hosted, by the vendors themselves, or do we want them in one central location? Or, I mean, if the vendor wants it in a central location.
I mean, it's really a question of open source. If you want it hosted on Garrett, ask and there will be a Garrett repo created for you.
I mean,
and if you post it privately, then we're all none the wiser anyway.
Right. I mean, we'd prefer it to be in Garrett if
Right.
it's going to be part of the actual community code.
Okay.
So, I mean, really, it's just an ask of ONF to, or whoever can manage Garrett to crank out the 5 or 6 repos we need for adapters, library, and protos. And then if somebody comes along and says, I want my repo for my adapter, then you get it, and that's it.
Okay.
I mean, if the vendor wants to do work in their own private repo and then allow us to fork or just pull, I don't know. I mean, we can't force volunteers to do work the way we want them to do.
Okay.
I mean, so it sounds like, 2 adapters or 2 repos for Adtran OLT, Adtran ONU, adapter for OpenOLT, adapter for Broadcom OpenOMCI ONU, a repo for Python libraries, and a repo for protos.
Yeah, I was actually thinking of just a single Adtran repo, because we actually share code between the ONU and the OLT.
So the versioning would be lockstep between them?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, because obviously it's as a vendor, we're under complete control of how we release something.
Yeah, and with OpenOLT and the Broadcom ONU, everyone kind of overrides as they wish, and stuff's a little more spread out. So keeping those separate, I think, is probably a good idea.
Yeah, and sometime in the future, if we have a single.
I'm saying the Adtran one, he'll put the Adtran ones together. I'm saying for the OpenOLT and the Broadcom one, keep them separate.
Yeah.
And well, while we're talking about it too, the name that I gave the Broadcom OpenOMCI ONU is terrible, and it's my fault that I named it that. What do we think about giving it like a different name, like OpenONU? I don't want to presume that, but I figure before we start making repos, now may be the time.
Yeah, that'd be fine with me, because I envision eventually having a single base image, period, for ONU, since they're so similar, and then vendors can just do a small amount of work to derive their own.
Oh, I second that.
Okay, then we can just henceforth from now on call it OpenONU, and then save ourselves a mouthful of terrible naming.
Thank you. I'm all for that as well. All right. So it sounds like I think we have general agreement with the proposal that was put out there, with a few additional comments added in during discussion here. I also saw that Zach, and I don't think he joined the bridge, let me just double check, he had agreed to help work with to setting up repos next week, for the first portion of the proposal that was on the email. And then because we've been looking for a volunteer for that, I think he will assist with that, and also is working on a new repo request form should there be vendors up the road who want to have repos created for their adapters as well. So some of that is in progress. It looks like that can get kicked off next week. Any other comments or discussion, feedback on this?
We want to talk about whether the Go versions of adapters and the Python versions of adapters are in the same repo, or leave it up to the asker to decide for themselves. Specifically, OpenOLT is one that comes to mind, because we're going to work on containerizing the Python one, and I know there's work on the Go one. Whether they're all in the same repo or not, I guess it doesn't really matter so much, but it'd be nice to, if you're working on one and the other, to have a place to kind of compare one function to the other and have one, repo produce 2 builds depending on which one you need. But
yeah, the only problem is there got to be version checkpointed at different times.
Yeah, maybe. Okay.
Yeah, is there a way to create different have the Go version have both of them in the same repo but create different versions for them? Is that possible, or is it it's not?
I mean, it seems like it would be possible, but you know, like anything, it'll kind of naturally materialize. And you know, I did a build and it is 1.x and it happens to be the same for both. I don't know. I feel like we can always change later. It's not. I don't think it's that big of a deal.
Yeah, I mean, maybe though, maybe it would be interesting because you would do the Go work in the version comparable to what you expect to
right
to actually implement.
Sure.
And if the Python version's ahead,
yeah, then you've got your
right. Then you could go to that and decide. You know, the implementer can decide which.
Sure. And then at the point where there's parity, then you just basically deprecate the Python and you move forward with Go version 1.xyz being the one that you get that feature.
And maybe versioning should include, or tags should include something that tells you what feature set or has some kind of decoder ring.
Yeah. I mean, my point really is I don't want to overthink this too much right now anyway. It's really just get something out there we can go start working, but it's a thought.
Yeah, a single checkout that
does it all,
allows you to
so
stare and compare.
So yeah, your make file could produce a Python Docker image or the Go Docker image, and it's just depending on which one you have, it may be one set of features or another until they match.
Maybe the make test could actually compare the versions.
Maybe. So anyway, if nothing else, I figured it would just fall into that anyway. But I figured the folks who are working on the Go version, you know, might have something to say about it. But if nothing else, when the Python version of OpenOLT adapter repo is created, if it's just going to be the OpenOLT adapter repo, and then you just put your Go code in there, or put your Python code in there, you know.
Yeah, I mean, just create the repo.
Just create the repo.
Make your first directory Python or Go or.
Yeah.
So it's very explicit on.
Sure. Yeah.
Any other, excuse me, any other feedback on that from the group? Okay. Any remaining items that need to be discussed related to the repo strategy?
Well, for the pip installable module, is a name set for the module like PyVoltha acceptable for everyone?
Sounds great.
Any name I don't have to come up with myself.
Yes, any name that's not mine, I love.
And I guess we'll just have an open item on for one or more people to handle the CLI and OF agent, putting those into separate repos. Because I don't think I'll be able to, you know, I don't want to overcommit myself.
Yeah. So I think. Yeah. Sorry, Chip. Go ahead.
There's not a real pressing need right now, but it's probably after we get the Python pip installable module created and somewhat stable, then probably have the CLI and the OF agent into a separate repo at that time and have it consume the pip installable shared libraries if it needs them.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay.
And do we have any volunteers on the call today?
I can take a look at it once Chip is done with the shared one. I can look at it because we're working on the OF agent at this time. So it's
okay. And that'll be next sprint at least, middle of next sprint. Maybe.
Okay. Thank you. All right. I think that covers what we wanted to go over on today's agenda. So Chip, thank you again for putting that proposal out on VOLTHA Discuss, so we'd have that for today's discussion with the group. I did not have any other topics on the agenda for today, so I think you'll be getting some time back. Are there any other items that the group would like to discuss before we adjourn today? Okay, so next week is our final week for sprint. I think it's sprint 13 that we're on. And then also we do have a number of future topics coming up for discussion. We don't have those targeted to specific time slots yet. And if there are other items you would like to have added to the list, please let me know. I think I'll take one last call for comments and then we'll drop the bridge. Any comments before we drop? All right, thanks everyone. And Bjorn, I think you said that you would make those slides available to the group as well, so appreciate your efforts there also. Thanks everyone.
I would do what do you think is the best way?
I think we've got two options. You can either provide it over Volta Discuss, or if you're comfortable putting it somewhere on the wiki, we can find a home for it there. That's, I think, up to your preference on whether you want to have.
Okay, then I will share it via the Volta Discuss. That's the easiest thing for me. Okay, thanks.
All right, thanks.
Okay.
I'll go ahead and drop the bridge. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.